All right, everyone, now it's time to talk about North Korea. You know that country that was sort of coming out of the Stone Age when Donald Trump was president? He became the first U.S. president to cross into North Korea. Kim crossed into South Korea, and they plant some peace trees and other cringy shit that nations that used to not be on great terms do when they're trying to have some degree of rapprochement. And that peace was breaking out. John McCain, was spinning around in his grave. John Bolton decided to write a book in anger at the fact that there might not eventually be a nuclear war among the DMZ. But now Kim Jong-un has reversed course, because when the U.S. leadership changed up and you traded out a heavy hitter, an actual leader for the JV team, which is the Biden stewardship, he's out to lunch. He doesn't understand Eastern-style politicking and diplomacy, and so he has repeatedly failed here. What Kim Jong-un's going to do is, naturally, he's going to follow in his forebears' footsteps, and he's going to up the ante. It always worked before. The only situation in which it didn't work, as far as his own leadership goes, is for that brief moment where the U.S. had a cutthroat businessman in office who had done business in Asia. I've tried to explain before the way in which business and diplomacy is conducted when the U.S. president goes to France can't be the same as when he goes to an Asian country. There's different decorum, different behaviors are expected, different everything. This is why the current administration is incapable of constraining the Russians in any meaningful degree. All it's doing is pumping Ukraine full of weapons because diplomacy has completely failed. Western European leaders like Macron, who have tried to tackle the issue, suffer the same problem. They've never done business and would prefer not to even set foot in a place like Moscow. They look down upon people in Moscow. They look down upon the North Koreans too. A vast plurality of Americans conceive of North Korea as being led by a madman. Kim Jong-un's not a madman, and if you approach diplomacy with North Korea from that bent, you're going to fail every single time. If you approach it with humility and giving great respect to the wonderful people of North Korea, now will you please cut out all of the missile tests? Kim Jong-un will say, I'll consider it. He'll be very, astute and austere when you're there. The second you leave, he'll broadcast a message to his country saying, we're going to test the H-bomb tomorrow. These American weaklings will burn in a lake of fire, their own fats immolating their stupid bones, and stuff like that, because you can get away with it. Normally, the United States has tried to bribe North Korea, either directly or through our Chinese business partners. Okay, test the missiles. Please don't test another A-bomb, at least this year, and we'll give you an aid shipment. We'll give you a shit ton of rice and stuff, and, more of your people won't starve this winter. That's what the United States has done. That appeasement even got to the point where we developed their nuclear weapon program under Bill Clinton by giving them the means to refine and enrich nuclear material, building them a goddamn reactor with the hollow promise, we're not going to turn this into a weapons program if you help us build this. All we want is electricity. Bill Clinton screwed up the most of all of them. Biden is a close second with regards to North Korea. When Kim Jong-un is coming out and saying, we're going to exponentially increase the number of nuclear weapons we have, other than the Chinese maybe eventually getting a little bit nervous about their small neighbor and telling them to cut it out, there's nothing that we can do. Rapprochement would have solved the issue. Look, again, under Trump, things were moving at least in the right direction. He still had problems. You went several years without any major tests, limited a number of missile tests, and so forth. The rhetoric between North and South Korea, importantly, definitely was much more demure. You had the repatriation of veterans' remains from the DMZ. Some dude stepped on a landmine, and you got to piece them together like a jigsaw puzzle, I guess, but they managed to repatriate remains. There were hostage exchanges going on. The unilateral release of prisoners by North Korea almost on day one. You had a lot of peace breaking out there, and the powers that be don't want peace there, because every time that Kim Jong-un says this, they can get more budget for funding anti-missile drone tech or something like that. They love it when you have some supposedly crazy foreign leader that makes military threats constantly. They love it. North Korea is effectively the Department of Defense's cash cow, just to be clear, and Russia too now. Again, despite the fact that they've invaded a country that isn't actually our military ally at all and is countered by a massive bulwark encompassing most of the rest of Europe. But I digress. This kind of escalation in rhetoric is the natural result, again, around New Year's Eve, of course. It's a very celebratory thing. For a couple of years, you didn't really get that. We're going to make amazing advancements, and we're going to take on more of a role in the world, and we look forward to working with our South Korean allies, even if, they are dipshits that abandoned Juche. That was the rhetoric for a few years there. Now it's, we're going to nuke you. We've gone right back to the 2000s or to the 1990s. In fact, it's worse now because they've actually got some sort of boosted atomic weapon. Their last test did go much better than the prior test. The first one failed. Then they had a series of low-yield atomic weapons. Be great for use on the battlefield, not necessarily modern design. Now they're up to possibly 40, 50 kilotons. They have made a significant advance prior to Trump effectively locking them out and saying, look, my little red button works better. It's bigger, so you might want to calm down. That's how you approach politicking cross-oceanic. That's how, if you're not going to Western Europe or Canada or Oceania or a few of the Asia, like Japan or something, you must play the game. And Biden don't know how to play it. Neither does his fucking Secretary of State. Neither do any of the woke diplomats that I'm sure that he's hired. Do you think any of these people have done business in Korea? Let alone, none of them have set foot in North Korea probably. They won't even go to Pyongyang to meet with Kim Jong-un. They'd be shitting their pants. They're not going to step foot on North Korean soil. They'd be sweating bullets the entire time. Kim knows this and holds it over people's heads. The one person that actually understood this in the last half century got shit-canned by the U.S. system for being too peaceable. Saying, well, how are we going to justify a bigger military budget if we don't have all these power If ISIS is in decline because of Trump's policies, if the Syrian civil war is winding down because of those policies, if we're planning to leave Afghanistan per Trump's policies, if, you don't have hostility in Korea per Trump's policy, you see where this is going. If you've either obliterated or reproached with all of your enemies, how do you justify continuing the U.S. massive imperialistic war machine? How do you justify it? You can't. People get war exhaustion anyway. And if there's no major conflict going on, how can you justify why the Pentagon needs 100 billion more big ones this year than last? The public wouldn't like that very much. It's a cash cow. It's a cash grab for them. They like power and they like money. They're not interested in keeping the United States safer. Biden least of all. And even if he was, he doesn't have the mental wherewithal or the experience to do jack shit about Kim Jong-un. We're going to go back to using the old, stale, boring, non-working response of attempting to use sanctions on a country whose only main trading partner ignores the sanctions. And anyway, when China does smack them down, what happens? Russian smugglers get involved. They've got a tiny border with North Korea too. All they've got to do is grease some palms and Putin will look the other way. They do brisk business, and right now there's even more of a reason for them to engage in piracy and smuggling, because if you can make that kind of money when the economy of Russia is kind of having problems, it's much more money than before. Hell, it's probably denominated in US dollars or euros or something. You're cleaning up, you're making bank. North Korea can ship in or out whatever the hell it wants, regardless of what anyone else wants in the world. The only thing that we can do is a full rapprochement using diplomatic leverage that DC currently doesn't have. And despite Trump setting up the ROK to be the main player in talks with North Korea, that broke down too, because the second that the United States is disinterested in bothering to continue rapprochement, the North Koreans' response will automatically be, because of the sense of nobility within North Korean culture, shut the fuck up and go away, we're not going to deal with you anymore. They've got to. Kim Jong-un would look weak. Americans wouldn't understand this. If Kim Jong-un were to continue rapprochement and making concessions to South Korea, despite the main sphere player, the United States, backing off and going back to its old war rhetoric, as opposed to actually attempting diplomatic rapprochement, if he were to do, he might get overthrown. His own military leaders would probably kill him. They'd say, well, yeah, it turns out he wasn't actually the legitimate son of Kim Jong-il. Actually, this is over our pawn or something. They would pull that. And the people there would go into cognitive dissonance mode and they would actually follow through with it. Much as though it'd be funny if some crazy intrigue like that happened, Kim Jong-un's not going to risk that. He understands his culture better than fucking Joe Biden does. That's about all. Peace out.